This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
you doing, sir? Hopefully everything is working well. I'm not sure where Josh is at right now, but
Well,
I'm
he just texted me saying, reminding me to get on. So
okay. No worries. We have plenty of time, so we can wait for him to get here. I'm recording this, so I sent out an email to 6,000 subscribers twice today. So I sent out one this morning and just sent out another email just a second ago. I put it out on LinkedIn and Facebook. I'll make sure to take the recording and put it into a video format and share it across platforms this afternoon. So it should be a pretty cool experience. We're not going to do any Q&A, live Q&A or anything like that. It's just for you guys to talk about your military careers and for me to kind of just ask some questions around that, and then make it pretty short and sweet for you, and talk about the kind of the end of the campaign, and just give kind of a overview of everything that you're doing and wanting to do with Alaska.
good deal. Yeah. So is this going to be broadcast live? I assume then, huh?
Yeah, it's currently live right now. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, so it's currently recording, so you like everything we're saying is like it's live, and so like we're and we can mute. You can mute. You have controls on there. You can mute yourself if you need to. Otherwise, it's just audio format. It's pretty simple, just like if you're doing a radio show interview type of thing.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm going to go to mute for just a second, if you don't mind.
No worries at all. Wait for Josh to get here, and then we'll get started. I'm not sure where Josh is at.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
pending him. If you want to go ahead and get started with yourself, pretty much anything you're going to say will, and just kind of give a bio. Mostly because, like, the reason why this got brought up in the first place is because I talked to Josh, and we had initially had a conversation, like not too much, but on accident, and I didn't know that you both were military history. I had no clue about your military history, and like I've been aware of you. And being the mayor of Anchorage and things like that. And the time that you were mayor of Anchorage, I was living in Wasilla, and so
Yeah.
pretty much the only thing that I knew about you was from my own personal experience of interacting with you and your wife when I was doing the petition, and then
Right.
also just the news and the media and seeing how the assembly made it very complicated for you to do your job. I think most people knew when you first got the job that it was going to be very complicated, and so I think a lot of people, for at least from my perspective and for me, is that I think you did a much better job than what most people would have done if they were in your position. And so I kind of wanted, like, now that I know you have military background, it kind of makes a little more sense. So I want to kind of get a wrap around, like, where's your military history? What is it? And ultimately, how does that impact your leadership?
Well, I think your whole life experience comes into play as you get older. So my real short history: I grew up in Wisconsin. I went to ROTC in University of Wisconsin there at Madison. Then I went into the active duty Air Force for 9 years. I flew B-52s and B-1s. And then I got into the airlines in 90, which moved me to Anchorage in 91. That was Northwest Airlines. I got back into the military, the Alaska Air National Guard. Actually, I did a 2 year stint at 11th Air Force as a war plans officer for 11th Air Force. Then I went across town to Coolest, got into the Guard, and I finished out there. So I did 24 years total, and the reservists and guards folks will understand. I had 22 good years, so I had 2 years in the inactive reserves, and that was it. The military, and if I can put a shameless plug in for the Alaska Air National Guard and the Alaska National Guard, great organizations. What a great way to start your life and your career, no matter what you wind up doing. Great organizations, take care of their people. You get to see the world. If you've got kids that are struggling to find out what they want to do in life, send them to the Alaska Air National Guard or the National Guard.
Nice. Well, speaking of that, like, what kind of planes did you fly?
Well, in training in the military, I flew T-37s, T-38s. Then went into B-52s for a couple years. Went back to the T-38 and the B-1. We flew. I was in the initial cadre of the B-1s in the mid '80s. So we would fly since the airplanes weren't all built. Then we would go to the factory and pick up new airplanes. We needed airplanes to fly, so we would. Then they gave us T-38s to just kind of fly whenever we wanted. And then as we got more airplanes, we flew the B-1 more and more. And then I don't know if you're asking, but in the airlines, I flew lots of airplanes. So that's kind
Yeah,
of a long list.
interested in general, but yeah, of course, the bombers are definitely the more interesting. And like, specifically, like, what was the cockpit of that plane? Because I got to go in a DC-3 yesterday at the airport, which
Oh,
is really cool.
really?
Yeah, I got to sit in one. It's that Northern Transportation or something. It's
Yep.
actually in service, and he was showing me how how the piston blew out of the cylinder while they were flying, and I got to see like the cylinder and stuff. Pretty crazy, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, like, that's a really cool experience. I've never been in a plane like that old 1940s plane. So I like, what's the cockpit like in a B-52 and a B-1? Like, is a B-52 like old, archaic looking? Like,
Well, I'll just say one thing. There's lots of throttles.
yeah,
There's 8 of
I bet,
those things.
I bet.
And
I
there's
can't
pictures
imagine.
out there of both an older and modern B-52, but essentially it is the same. Great airplane. Physically very, it's a very physical airplane to fly, especially when you're air refueling. Um, you know, um, it's got a great big wing, over 200 feet wingspan, so it can be a challenge there. And the air refueling was the real tough part, and everything I did was low level, both B-52s and B-1s. So the mission was actually identical. You just in the B-1 you went a lot faster, and it was like a sports car versus a lumber wagon. So the B-1 was the best time of my professional life, barring
You know,
anything.
Speaking of those planes, though, like, one of the highlights I would say is like the fact that they're still in service, and like, so
Yeah.
like I'm assuming like back in the day, did they actually have like a date that they were planning on getting rid of them at some point, and like they just kept doing it like over the time? I assume so, but like I don't know what that was like when you were flying them. Did they tell you like there was like a time period where they're gonna like get rid of these planes, or was it kind of
Well,
estimated that they were gonna run forever?
yeah, the B-52 first came in service in 1952 in Moses Water. It's called MWH, or Moses Hole, or Moses Lake, excuse me, in Washington. Central Washington State was the very first one. And then I didn't fly it, of course, until 1983. So it was pretty old then. In fact, and I never flew the E models or the D models. Those were the Vietnam era ones, but I flew the G's and the H's. And now the H's are the only ones that I know of that are left, and they're going to go to a service life of 92 years. And the Air Force is in the middle of re-engineing them. So my understanding is it'll go now to 4 engines instead of 8. So probably puts 4 very large turbofans on it instead of the old, what are they, J57 turbojet engines, which the G model had. So not to get too technical there. And then
It's no, I love the technical stuff. That's my whole page. I actually have technology in my bio, so like you're welcome to get technical with it. So it's not a problem. It's really amazing stuff though. And the key here is kind of ties in with you as a leader, is the fact that, like, in my opinion, is that we need those type of business people, those type of leaders in charge, people that understand cost efficiencies, know how to, like, make something last for much longer than it was anticipated, find good designs and kind of expand on those. That's kind of what I want to do, want to see with the state in general. And so, like, how would you think that kind of influence impacts, like, I assume, like, your day to day with government management? You've done it as mayor. How are you going to do it as governor, with like these backgrounds and leadership abilities?
Well, I think the most applicable leadership, I believe, is both innate and learned. And and you can learn parts of leadership. People say, "Well, how many people have you managed in life?" I says, "I never manage people. I lead people, and I've followed great leaders, but I lead people and I manage things." And I learned as a young second lieutenant that from an old mentor who was a senior NCO. He says, Dave, you're going to learn most of your leadership from the senior NCOs as you progress in your career in the Air Force. And he was right. The NCOs are the ones that know what's going on in an organization. They're very often the most technically apt people. A little bit different in aviation in the Air Force because the most technical jobs are usually, not always, but usually the pilot jobs, the aviator jobs. But I learned great leadership skills from NCOs and from senior officers. And then but leadership in the governor's office is probably, and I believe, in fact, I believe this firmly, that you've got to have the same kind of job. Political leadership technically is not the same as, or the job is not the same as government leader, or excuse me, business leadership or military leadership, because the rules are completely different. And so we've often, and I like to use the example, and you can love Trump or hate Trump. It's just a case study here. Look how much he struggled. He had over 20,000 employees when he became president in 2016. And he struggled for 4 years because he didn't understand political leadership and he didn't understand the rules of the game. And then, after 4 years of learning that, and then 4 years of being abused by the Biden administration, he learned a lot of things. And now, look at how effective he is. He is with a bear friendly majority in the House and Senate. He's accomplishing great things because he understands the politics. And that's why I think leadership in the political realm is absolutely essential to being successful in the governor's job, because the day one, the new governor's got to get a lot of things done all at once. And so you can't be learning. And there's people in this race, please hire me to be your governor. I have no experience in government. And I'm just thinking, having had 3 hard years learning the rules of government and how things work, it's literally nonsensical. I can't explain that more clearly than that. You've got to have experience in the field into which you're going. And right now, there's only two people that have that, and that's Bill Walker and myself. And he was a former governor. I was a former mayor. So, the military side of it, military is different. You get to
You know,
order
you
people.
brought up Walker. Let's discuss him since he's running. It's a great. It's not. I wasn't really planning to get into candidate stuff, but like Walker's a great example because he's an administrator. He's been in charge of of the governorship. He was the guy that sold the PFD, etc. So how about we lay out how your leadership is going to be different than Walker's? I mean, that should be pretty easy, drastic, vastly, hopefully drastic difference. But I'd love to
Yeah.
hear kind of a little bit of a difference of what you're expecting your leadership to be compared to his, because 8 years under Walker was really bad. Dunleavy was, I would say, a lame duck. I mean, I'm not going to be mean, or he's a nice person, but he didn't sign my repeal, and he had an option to. And like I was at the governor's ball. I personally offered it for him to sign. He rejected the offer. So like I don't have much love for Dunleavy. I'm not a big fan of the things he's done, but I would like to know what you're planning to do differently than both of those administrators.
Well, let me characterize it this way to frame the question that you just asked, and it's this: when everyone is considering a candidate, you got to kind of consider three questions, and you really need to get to yes on all three questions. And the first question is, does this candidate ideologically agree with me? So in my case, I'm a fiscal social conservative with a pretty strong independent streak or libertarian streak. I'm a believer that unless government really must do something, it shouldn't do that thing. And that's why I didn't compel masks or vaccines. I go, it wasn't my job as mayor. So a candidate's got to be ideologically aligned. Then you got to ask the question, well, can this person, my candidate that I'm considering, actually do the job? Well, that's when you start looking at things like resumes. Has anyone done, it's just like when you're going to hire somebody for your small business or large business, you go, have they ever done this job or anything close to it before? The field now gets real narrow because just remember, being a legislator is not this job. The job is about 20% dealing with the legislature, and it's about 80% everything else, which is running government, creating, drafting policy, but dealing with the legislature is only about, I'd say, 20, maybe 30% of the job. So who's got the resume? Again, I'm coming back to what we started with, which was really me and Bill Walker. Edna has a bit, but the way they're structured out there in the valley, the city is actually run by a manager, not run by the mayor. In Anchorage, it's called a strong mayor, statutorily, and in the state, it's statutorily a strong, or constitutionally a strong governor. The governor has complete executive authority over government. The third question is, and it really doesn't apply to this conversation, is but can the person win? And that's when you start looking at things like polling. Is how's that person polling? And you'd have to go into the polling and look at
I
that.
think
So
you make a really good point on that, because especially with ranked choice voting, and like with this jungle primary system, is like people are voting on their emotions. They're like, oh, I really like this person, or Dave said this one thing, or they wrote this nasty article about Dave this one time. That's the reason. It's like, that's not enough, guys. Like
no,
seriously, it's not enough to say you're not going to vote for one of the leading Republican candidates, and you're going to you're throwing your vote away by voting for a really low level candidate. You're just throwing it away.
yeah,
I got into an argument about that with a leftist, and I'm trying to educate them as well about ranked choice. So he was like trying to be ideological with it. It's like, no, sir, you don't understand. You're throwing it away when you vote the way you are. And he just truly didn't understand that. He wasn't willing to educate himself on that either. You will be throwing your vote away if you vote for a low level Republican candidate. It's just a fact. It's just the way the
yeah.
system's designed.
And the thing of it is this ranked choice, and actually not ranked choice, but the open primary system that we're dealing with this week, that came in with ranked choice voting, which is a November issue. This open primary, I thought I could live with it. And I thought, it's kind of very democratic, open primary. And then you get into it. Now we've been experiencing, we have, because of the open primary, primarily, we have no vetting. The party doesn't come in and get to vet their own candidates. They're kind of technically forced. They're not compelled, because the Republican Party could have, and the Democrat Party could have come in earlier this year before June 1st and had their own primaries. And I had recommended that they do, or they should have. And then we could have vetted, because now you just got a whole bunch of Republicans. It could have been the other way around. It could have been a whole bunch of Democrats and just a few Republicans. So the onus, or the challenge, is on the Republican side in this cycle. But we got several candidates in the race who have just not been vetted, and one of them is actually leading, and that's now creating a real challenge. And then if you make mention, and I don't, I'm being accused of attacking another candidate. I'm not at all. And but then that candidate, through a surrogate, is attacking everyone else, and it's kind of crazy. And so we've got
You
to.
know, it's unfortunately it's a situation that I also dealt with during with the repeal project, and it was like, because I backed Jerry Ward for GOP chair over Carmela Warfield, and because of that, I was uninvited from all the women's GOP groups in the entire state, like instantaneously. And it's like,
Mhm.
wow, that was a very like knee jerk reaction. I believe I'm a pretty nice guy overall, and I believe I'm allowed to pick who I want to be GOP chair, and Jerry's not a communist, so it should be okay, right?
Yeah, I know,
But
Jerry.
in like the grand scheme of things, I'm gonna get same kind of flack for backing you for governor over whoever else they want me to. And that's not how we should operate as Republicans. And I'm gonna encourage people to not operate that way. And so some of the videos and things that I post could be seen as attack. I look at it as information, and I'm not accusing anyone of doing anything nefarious or anything like that. I'm just posting information. The
Right. I
way
don't
that
think it's an
this
attack if you're telling the truth. And if you look
exactly
at
the
the
thing that
Republican field,
Mhm.
most of us have been in public life, and we've been thoroughly vetted. I mean, I've probably been vetted the most. For Bill Walker's there, Tom Begich a little bit. Of course, the left wing media doesn't want to vet too thoroughly their side. But then we've got some candidates that have not been vetted at all, and had they been vetted early on, I think they probably wouldn't even be in the race because the
I,
party wouldn't have allowed it. And the party is the enforcer of the platform. And this is why we're in trouble at times with Senator Murkowski. And again, lover or hater, it's not that's not the point. The point is when you have a candidate or even an incumbent who is not abiding by the party platform, and I'm a great admirer of the Republican Party platform. I believe in every one of its planks. But when a candidate comes in and violates those planks, it's the party's duty and responsibility to come in and enforce and tell people, well, you're not going to get an endorsement from the party. In fact, the party may go after you if you don't support the platform. And so we've been facing that for quite a few years now with some candidates. It's problematic.
I agree. I think the system is problematic in general. I think there's no way to fix it. There's no way to really navigate it. But tying it back to military and your military history and your leadership abilities, I have to say it's pretty unique experience to talk to someone that's flown B-52s and B-1s. So I would like to hear a little bit more about
Yeah.
that, and specifically the pressure that goes into you actually having to fly planes like that. The expense of the plane itself is just astronomical, and like being trained over the amount of time, years of experience it takes you to just get to the point of being able to sit in one of those planes or be near one of the planes is pretty incredible. So like tell me about, like, I don't know how much you can share. I understand the private military nature of the type of
There's
things you're
nothing I
doing.
know that's classified anymore. I've been
Well,
out a
perfect.
long
Well,
time.
I'd love to hear about your some pressure situation or something about the plane that really like highlights something that you've had to go through that really makes your leadership really sharp.
Well, I mean, I've been very fairly blessed in the military without any, I guess, real serious thing. I mean, the worst thing that's happened was a cockpit fire, and I was looking at having to get my three guys. It was a B-1, and we had a electric motor on an ejection seat that had caught fire, and so we were, cockpit was full of smoke. So I had proceeded to an area in South Dakota where I knew was flat, and where we looked at where was looking at ejecting the other three guys, and getting them out of the plane. Nothing came of it because we were able to get back to to Ellsworth Air Force Base there in Rapid City before it became a real problem. But other than that, the Air Force thoroughly treated me well. I really enjoyed it. Flying the B-1, you'd go out and you'd fly a 6 or 7 hour mission, and an hour and a half of that would be air refueling, and 2 to 2.5 hours would be low level. The low level was the fun part. You're at anywhere from 250 feet to 500 feet off the ground at 600 miles an hour. That was fun. We had almost some mid airs certainly with birds and other general aviation aircraft, but I don't think anything. I've never been in combat. I was trained because when I was flying the B-1s, they were nuclear only, so they weren't even allowed really out of the country until after they were.
That's cool. So
Yeah.
did you ever fly with a nuke on board? Can you say that?
Yeah, so when you had nukes on the airplane, you were sitting on what's called SIOP alert, SIOP. I think it's called Single Integrated Operations Plan. So nuclear alert. We've seen it all in the movies, and it's kind of like that. You were loaded with weapons. You don't fly with nukes unless you're carrying them some way for, say, maintenance on the thing, and that was normally actually done in C-141s back in my day. They were the ones that physically moved the bombs. If I was flying and I had a nuke on board, I was heading north and west, and probably within 14 hours, I was gonna need to find a base in Japan or China after deploying all the weapons. So we'll leave it at that. So, and then I
So
obviously never did that.
well, with like, so you have this a massive operation from above, 40,000 foot pilot view of Alaska. What do you see happening? with this, and if it's under in your control over the say 8 years, what do you get? What's the 40,000 foot view? What does it look like?
Alaska itself?
Yes, in the future for under your leadership.
Oh, I see. You're talking a little more metaphorically. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
of course. Yeah, metaphorically. Yeah, I want to see kind of like what do you see from like an overview. It's a huge state. It really is.
oh
I've
yeah.
traveled it all doing the petition, and it was unbelievable. After is far bigger than anything I've ever could even possibly imagine. And I haven't even seen it all. I've
Right.
been to Barrow, been to Ketchikan, been to Sitka. I haven't been to Kodiak. I haven't been to the Dutch Harbor and some of these other places, but been to Sitka, been to Juneau, been Valdez, Homer, all these other places, but it's still a lot. There's still a lot to see. It's a big state. So what's the big overview? What's the big overview for your administration?
Well, I think I always get the question. I get it a couple times a day. Got it from just in the last couple of days. The same question. Well, what's your first priority? What you going to do? My first priority is about 12 priorities, because this notion that you'll do one thing and then step to the other, you can't do it that way. You've got to come in day one and focus on about 10 or 12 major subject matters. A lot of it involves infrastructure and other challenges. So we've got to robust the delivery of natural gas from Cook Inlet. We've got to get a gas line built from the North Slope, the gas line. We got to get a spur from that line into Fairbanks. We've got to rebuild and the marine highway system, the ferry system. That has come under, especially since COVID and the loss of a lot of key people. That thing has got to be rebuilt to include new ships and new docks. We've got highway problems. The Hall Road up north is in terrible disrepair, and some of our highways are pretty darn bad. So we've just and we're over $10 billion in deferred maintenance. That's got to be dealt with, and we do that in a declining revenue environment. So something's got to give somewhere, because we're into and now we've got, I'll be honest with you, a lot of this is self-imposed. Yeah, have we been spending more money than we should have? You got to remember, back in the early 2000s, under a Republican administration, we nearly doubled the size of government. So, this is a bipartisan failure. But I'm not here to look back and place blame. I'm here to look forward and solve the problems that'll get us back to a full PFD. That'll get us into the building business, getting our capital expenditures up, because your capital budget is your seed corn. That's what creates the project, especially in our 90/10 money that we get, through our STIP and for DOT. Is we've got to get as much of the federal money as we can to build the infrastructure. Building the infrastructure, the building alone creates hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs. And the next governor is going to be faced with some real challenge. And I say, if the next governor does a really good job, he is
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
probably going to be a one-term governor,
I,
because
I understand that, and
yeah,
that's the unfortunate reality, especially with the legislature and the makeup. But the good thing for people like you is that there's people like me that have no interest in politics, no interest in being a politician, and want to put their entire business weight behind helping people like you get elected, on top of finding other people like yourself to get elected, so that way you have help in the legislature going forward.
right.
It will take years to get to the point where we can counter groups like Arabella and stuff, but just know that you have support. I'm a very young person, and I have a lot of young people that are very driven. They're willing to put in the time and effort to help people like yourself. So how in knowing that, what are you going to do for the young generation of people like me that are trying to start a new technology business, literally manufacturing technology in the state of Alaska, that does not happen, has never happened before, and I'm up against everything, against shipping, against all the struggles of finding people to work for me, etc. what are you going to do for me as a governor over the next 8 years?
Well, yeah, I'm assuming young entrepreneurs that want to live in Alaska and live, work, and play in Alaska. But the working part of it is real important, and the living part, that means being able to afford to live here. Government's got to get out of the way. So the notion that I would say I would come in and create a government program to help you fund your way of life, that's not government's job. My job as governor is to come in and drive down the cost of energy, drive down the cost of living by primarily getting government out of the way. Now, Trump came in and got a lot of the federal government out of the way. So now we can start developing our resources and create that wealth generation that is so essential to a thriving economy. And I'm just telling you, I'll be blunt with you. We've got a political party that believes things that are crazy, like carbon dioxide is a pollutant. Carbon dioxide has another name in our high school science books, and it's called plant food. And so we've got to get away from this notion that sustainable. I'll tell you what sustainable energy is. It's hydro, it's nuke, and it is natural gas, and even coal. Am I for belching smoke and all that in the atmosphere and chemicals? No. We can do clean energy, but the notion that wind and solar are renewable, if not perpetual, is nonsensical, because a windmill is very hard on the environment when you look at all the mining for all the minerals that it takes to create the electrical motors that are on them, and then they only have a service life of 15 years. And the blades themselves are made out of a resin that's highly toxic, and they can't be repurposed for anything. Solar panels, a different set of problems, and I don't think quite as severe. I'm not, and I'm for wind and solar. If you got a remote lodge, remote cabin, or a very small area, that it does work, but at great expense. But when it comes to grid, we've got to spin turbines perpetually, and that comes from hydro, it comes from nuclear, it comes from natural gas, it comes from coal and some oil. And that's what we've got to do, is drive down the cost of energy by finding the most energy dense form of energy, and that's the cheapest and most plentiful, and perpetuate that. And it's not wind, and on average it's not normally solar. So if you can drive down the cost of energy for a young family, try a young entrepreneur who's got to, say, heat a 3,000-foot small factory or office building, and then he goes home or she goes home and they got to heat their 2,000 square foot home. If you can drive down those that cost of heat and electricity, that makes a difference.
It does make a difference, and I can tell you the funny thing is you said specifically that you had a 3,000 square foot. I was literally talking to a younger gentleman like myself he actually showed me that DC3 yesterday. He runs his own. Him and his wife run their own business also, and they're looking to expand in Anchorage. Which is crazy. I told him I wouldn't do it in Anchorage, but he wants to expand in Anchorage and open up a shop there to do his upholstery business for aircraft. So his business is
Oh,
Piper Power Sports. He does. He's
excellent.
like one of two or three upholstery guys in the entire state that does aircraft upholstery stuff. So he's a young guy like me. Him and I chatted, hung out yesterday. Like he traded a snow machine I bought for my. He had an excursion, so he's just really nice guy, young guy. Military. I mean, not military, but a business owner like myself. And so neither one of us are military, so we don't have that leadership background that you do. And I do see that. I know that because like I've never flown a B-1 or B-52. I don't want to unnecessarily get to that. It's the extensive experience required to do that is beyond my desire. And so like that's what people don't understand is the amount of time and effort that you had to put in to get to that point.
Yeah.
But well, I'll let you know. I'll let you in today. But thank you so much. And it is really important. The things you said about energy and costs and maintaining and getting government out of the way. I can tell you, I've done multiple businesses in this state across construction with my grandfather, multi-million-dollar construction company, to the cannabis industry with my family out in Palmer, to technology now, and all three businesses, the government was in my way
Yeah.
in some capacity. And my grandpa's business, which was around for over 20 years, went out of business because of government being in the way. So unfortunately, I have a very, very deep experience with this, and I truly believe that people like you can maybe shift the state back where we needed to. The alternative is I have to leave, and I don't want to do that. But what I would love to do is give you a little bit of time to talk about election integrity, and then I'm going to pass it on to your lieutenant governor, who will be in charge of elections. So, can you give me a little bit of synopsis over your thoughts on election integrity and what you would do as governor towards helping address election integrity?
Well, to the details, Josh will speak in a moment on that. This is what I need your listeners to understand. Josh and I on this issue are in absolute lockstep. In fact, Josh and I are still searching for opportunities of where we disagree, situations we don't. We're in lockstep on everything. We may have a difference, maybe, on how to a tactic to apply, but on the all the principles were in absolute lockstep. And my commitment is to Josh's plan, which is constitutionally the responsibility of the lieutenant governor, to provide all the resources he would need to get our elections. You know, we got a lot of people that don't show up to vote because they don't trust the system, and that's got to change. That's a big part of why we have such low voter turnout in not just Anchorage and Fairbanks, but across the entire state. I mean, it's like when we get to 27, 28% voter turnout, we think we've really done a great thing. We should be unhappy with anything under 80%. And we need to compel, or not compel, but we need to provide an environment where people feel absolutely confident their vote is counted, and things like people who are not allowed to vote are not allowed to vote. They shouldn't be voting. And we got to clean up our voter rolls. But I'll leave that to Josh.
Yeah. Well,
He's
one
the
last
expert.
question. One last question on that particular front. This kind of hits home for me, and then like I said, I'll pass it on, and then I'll let you can leave if or stay for as long as you need to stay. I'm not gonna do any Q&A, so you don't have to stay on. You're welcome to. It will be recorded. I'll share it to Facebook and LinkedIn and various platforms. But so my petition for repeal ranked choice voting on election day, I was sitting at Dave and Buster's, and 6 states I had worked in had rejected ranked choice voting on election day. So 6 states: Arizona, Oregon, Idaho, Colorado, Nevada, South Dakota, all rejected ranked choice voting on election day. And they knew the results of the yes no. Again, this isn't a ranked choice voting question. They knew the answer to yes no on election day. And so Alaska took 2 weeks. I was winning by 4,000 votes. I ended up losing by 700. And it just recently was noted that 3,500 people were taken off of the active voter roll because of potentially not as U.S. citizens. So I would really, really love to know how many of those 3,500 people are voted for to repeal ranked choice voting in the last election. And I would love to know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, if there's any one voter who's not supposed to vote and is voting, I think that's a bit of a tragedy. Votes or elections are won, can be won, and sometimes are, by just a couple, just a handful or less votes. So every vote is precious, everyone is important, and everyone should be valid. And people who aren't supposed to be in Alaska, who aren't legally allowed to vote, should never vote. In our voting system, especially due to I'm just telling you, people on our voter rolls who aren't supposed to be there. People used to be residents, but part of that 3,300, I think it was driven down to about, and Josh can speak to this later, but 1,800, I think, or 1,900 is how many they finally settled on. And if you're not a citizen and a citizen of Alaska legally allowed to vote, you're not supposed to be voting, and we know that that's happening.
Well, thank you, sir, very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And like I said, I'll make this recording available. Like, you're welcome to stick around, but thank you again very much for your time. And these X spaces are relatively new to the political arena in Alaska, and I really appreciate you just jumping into it. Alaska Rants is another person. He is on this call. He's another young guy. He does a lot of similar type things, and he does these spaces way bigger audiences. So
Great.
if you'd like to communicate with him between, for especially for up to the general election, that might be
We would
worthwhile
we
for
would
you guys.
love, both Josh and I would love to.
There you go. And so pass that on to Josh. Come on, Josh. Please tell us about your history a little bit, and then we'll dive into the election specifics.
Yeah, well, I did not fly. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I did not fly bomber planes or have nukes sitting there ready to take off to defend the country. But I was in the Marine Corps for 9 years. I was in Marine reconnaissance for the first enlistment, and for the second half, I was in Marine Special Operations. And just to speak to one of the things you two were talking about earlier, what I noticed is the officers typically came in and they set the vision. They laid out the commander's intent. And once, it's like what Mike Tyson says, once the first punch is thrown, the plan goes out the window. You had to have built a team that was competent enough, and that's the NCOs that Dave was talking about, the senior NCOs and the junior NCOs that could lead and they could adapt on the battlefield actively without going to ask for permission in every little thing. You can't top down manage everything. But the officers, they came in and they set the tone and they set the character of the unit. If you had an officer who wasn't a great leader, didn't have great character, or gave a muddled vision, it was difficult for the people on the front lines to carry out that commander's intent because they didn't know if they were going to get reprimanded if they took a risk in it, if it didn't go out the way they had planned. And so this is one of the things I really like about Dave is I saw throughout his life consistent character. He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke. He's been with one woman for 41 years. He's raised a family. He's got a strong moral character. And then I saw the courage. He fought in the city, and he had some really tough fights, and he learned a lot. But he was humble enough to learn and invite a younger guy like me onto his team and to start building another team. And he, after losing a race, he still came back, and now he's running for a statewide race. So I see someone who 50% of the time won in our liberal city, which is more liberal than the state. So he has the electability, he's received more votes, even in the race he lost, than any other Republican running. And I think if my math's right, more than all of them running combined received in their last race. So he's got the electability, but he has the history, the proven courage to keep fighting even when it gets hard. And he has that character to kind of set a clear vision for people. This is the direction that we're going to go in. And we saw that with COVID. He came in, he ran on a platform and said, we're going to open up the city. We're not going to let the big businesses be open like Walmart while the small businesses suffer. So he said, we're going to stop the mask mandates. We're going to stop the COVID shots. And he did. He followed through. And so that's part of what I look for when I look at a leader. And that was sort of my experience when I was in, I got shot at a lot, and we got blown up, and we saw, some different fairly intense things. It's all relative to some other people saw a lot more than me, but I like leaders that care about others more themselves. I like leaders that have courage and are consistent and have integrity. And so, you'll hear a lot of things about me. You'll hear a lot of things about Dave. Anyone who steps up into politics, this is why it takes courage. People will run with a half truth, or they'll completely make up something, or they'll mishear and they'll run with something out of context. And so you'll hear negative things about people. But when I've dug into them, um, I like what I see in Dave. And so I think he can help, to your earlier questions. He can bring that leadership from his background in the military of dealing with high stress situations where there's
Yeah, I
big
think you make a great
consequences.
point, and I should have brought that up as the fact that I was living in Bainbridge, Washington, Island, Washington, when COVID initially happened, and so I saw what it was that crazy lady from the assembly on I forgot her name. She got appointed after Mayor Berkowitz resigned or whatever, but she went by an acronym. That's why I don't remember her name. But she locked the city down
Yeah.
completely. And then as soon as Dave got elected, he started working towards like essentially unlock the city. That's something that should be really highlighted. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good people running, like we talked about. Not a big fan of the open primary. I personally think that's worse than the ranked choice voting part of it. Not a big fan of the ranked choice voting either. But I really don't like how they bundled four separate things into one ballot measure. So people, had to vote on this coalition bill of, do you like the primary system? Do you like ranked choice? Do you want to get dark money out of politics, which it didn't do, and it was funded by it. But that's what I think most people were voting for. I don't think they were voting to combine the lieutenant governor and the governor, or for so uh, there's a lot of good people running in this system that we have now. There's 12 Republicans, maybe 8 of them are actively running, but with all of them, none of them have been an executive leader other than Edna, who's a sweet lady and is 84, and it's a different kind of structure. So it's not the same, and it's a smaller community, but none of them have been the guy, the one that stood up and says, this is what we're going to do, and takes the flack for it. All of them have been bureaucrats or legislatures with a staff of 5 people. So it's everybody, myself included, who hasn't been in the position can say, trust me, bro, this is what I'm going to do. But Dave kind of did it. And so I like that. I don't have to
Yeah,
just trust him. I can look
yeah.
and say,
It's good, that's important. It really is, and like that's especially being military. And that's what I mean about the innate ability, your guys' leadership abilities that you have going through those like life experiences that people like myself, even though we're business leaders and business owners, we will never be in that experience. Especially certain circumstances. Some of you guys have been in charge of like teams of people, large teams of people, etc. So one of that questions is like, Josh, so special ops is about small teams solving impossible problems with limited resources. So how does that apply to fixing Alaska's, elections and things that you'll be in charge of?
yeah, so Division of Elections is a very small team, actually. There's only like 15 people or so there. Now, it balloons up when you have an election, and they spend, millions of dollars each election cycle, and you have to employ a lot of people. But you're starting with a very small team that has a very high impact, which ironically, I don't know if I've actually even thought about this before until you posed the question, but Marine Special Operations, or any special operations group, you have a small team going to do a very specific, almost surgical mission, but you wouldn't spend more than $1 million training each special operator to do that if that mission wasn't critically important. So usually what they're doing, it's, like brain surgery, it's a very detailed, small mission that has an outsized impact. If you get a poke in the brain, it's a lot more important than a stubbing your toe, right? And so if we screw up our elections, that small little mistake there has ripple effects, right? We don't trust the system anymore. We don't have the right people elected. We just got an endorsement from a former legislature who's a finance guy and got a background in that. He was a commercial banker for years. Bart LeBron in the Interior. He won one of his races by 1 vote years ago, literally 1 vote. So when people say, election integrity, it doesn't really matter that much. It doesn't happen that often. I mean, never mind that we don't have photo IDs. We don't really have laws where it'd be easy to find it. But let's just assume that people are basically honorable in this system because we don't have a massive amount of proof of voter fraud. That's what people will say. But it's like, even if that was all true, you're telling me there's not one person who does something dishonest in an election? Somehow, like, there's a certain percentage of people that commit Medicaid fraud, that commit every other kind of fraud, but in elections, we're all just pure as the driven snow. I mean, we know these races come down to sometimes literally 1 vote. Other times, it might be a few hundred votes. Like ranked choice voting was upheld this last cycle. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the number is 664 votes. So, in a state when you're talking about 200 and something thousand votes are going to be cast, that's very rare. And you might even say it's statistically insignificant. But yet, obviously, it has a very outsized impact. So I think that's how we need to think about this, is that this is one of those areas that is critically important, and we just
Yeah, okay.
cannot get it wrong.
I think it leads right into my next question. It's like election integrity have been a big theme for your guys' ticket. your guys' campaign as a whole. And so I'd say that's, very polar opposite from the left and the progressives that never discuss election integrity. Lisa Murkowski's actively working to essentially stop the SAVE Act, which I have been actively a big promoter of since way before it ever went to Congress. I had my name on the SAVE Act, and I'm a big fan of it. So how does the military zero tolerance for compromise systems shape your approach to election integrity and specifically the division of elections?
Well, it informs me in probably a lot of different ways, but the first one that comes to mind is I have, no proof in court, and I'm not a data scientist, so I'm not going to make any claims, even though I've seen other people make them about the software issues that may or may not exist with corrupting elections.
Well, you don't necessarily have to, because
No-
Kevin Meyer came out and told us that the elections were hacked and
Well,
that all of our data was stolen and that our social security. So you don't even have to say it. I mean, the former lieutenant governor, someone that previously held your position, has already told us very openly. Granted, it would have been really nice to know he told us before the election. That way we could have at least checked to see if someone voted for us. You know
right.
what I mean? Like, there's no
Well,
way for us to know that. If they hack the voter system, stole our voter data, they could easily go and request because they have they have everything they need now. They can now request a ballot. So if they can do that, and then you have 3,500 people that are non-citizens voting on it shows, I don't know, man, sounds compromised. It just that's what it sounds like. So I'd love to hear I'm not asking you to essentially collaborate that, or but what will you do differently than what's been done is more of my question.
I understand that. Before I answer that, let me just finish the other part. I spoke to Myers. I don't remember if this was 16, 17, 18, somewhere in that time frame. I had gotten out of the military, and I asked him about election integrity because I was a little concerned. And the reason I was concerned is the second half of what I was starting to say is, well, I cannot prove, and I'm not going to speculate about the machines being compromised. But here's what I knew back then, 10 years ago, which got me to ask Kevin a question. And I was very disappointed with the answer, with how it didn't seem like our elections were taken seriously. I'm wearing a Garmin watch right now, and I'm holding a cell phone, and I think I have a smart fob for my truck in my pocket. None of those things were allowed where I worked in the military. We had to put them in a lockbox before we walked into the room where the secret computers were, because we were told the Chinese and the Russians at the factory were putting malware into Garmin devices and anything that was a smart device. And when you would get within a certain distance of the computers, even though they were not connected to the internet at all, they would somehow, I don't know, Bluetooth or however, they would connect. And then when you left that skiff, that information would be uploaded. So if that's true, what we were made to do every day, we had to lock our stuff in lock boxes before we walked in, because these open software devices were compromised 10 years ago or more. I've got to wonder about these machines in division of elections that we buy and we sit and everybody walks through, and I see no security precautions being taken. So my initial questions were about that kind of stuff, like, do we have a third party team that comes in and views this and sweeps these, or how are they debugged? What's the competence, what's our confidence that things are not being manipulated? And I have to this date no real answers on that. So my point with that is just to say that with a little bit of experience in other professions, in the military or in intelligence or in software, you see that some of these vulnerabilities are not conspiracy theories; they are legitimate vulnerabilities. So the only question is, are they being adequately addressed? And, maybe they are, but I haven't seen that proof. And we're supposed to have a government that's open and transparent. So if they're taking the right precautions, they should make that public so that way we can restore trust. And if they're not, we need to make
Well,
those changes.
Just to cover that real quick before you go, and I love the points you're making, but on the transparency side, and I had reached out to the Division of Elections when I was doing my petition.
Yeah.
And I believe that, I was a former banker. I spent 10 years at Wells Fargo and Key Bank, did over $36 million in lending. So, of course, I start at the financing side. I would dare say that the only reason Alaska knows about as much about Arabella Advisors is because of my research.
Right.
So, the work that I did when I was a banker, led me to come to the conclusion that, hey, maybe the cost of the elections might be significant to know and to research and to
Yep,
tell
that's right.
people. And so I contacted Division of Elections, spent a year and a half during the time I was doing my petition trying to get this information. And I just so happened to run into Dahlstrom. And like, why was that information not public? Why is that so complicated for me to get? It took me a year and a half to get the data.
Yeah.
And it proved that ranked choice voting was 300% more expensive. But, as from a lieutenant governor, from a transparency standpoint, would that be something and then one other thing I'd like to point out, since you're going to be in charge of elections, and I think it's something to point, is that whenever you're doing your petition, that I got in trouble for campaign finance rule violations, and so when I went to the staff, I had asked them very specific questions. They gave me the answers. They gave me the wrong answers, etc., and that ultimately led, which APOC is under your guys' administration, so keep that in mind. But the point is like they gave me the wrong information when I reached out to APOC initially. I was like line by line said, "Hey, I'm doing this, 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 and this," and they gave me the wrong information. Then fined me for the
Yeah.
wrong information, and then
That's
on
insane.
record said they gave me the wrong information. It willingly admitted they gave me the wrong information and fined me anyway, and that is ridiculous. One, two, I went to them. I said, "Okay, fine, you guys fined me. Can you guys at least take the campaign finance book and put it in the petition book?" So that way, when people get a petition and do a petition for the first time, like me, as a citizen, can see that the petition rules and the campaign finance rules related to the petition are in one place. Why is that so damn complicated? Like it's just super simple stuff. And so I got so annoyed by this, I created the election map.
Yeah.
And so as you can see, I have a deep frustration with
Right.
government not doing things right, and like it really bothers me. So how would this change under your leadership?
Right. So this is part of the same second question you asked. So what are we going to do different? How do we fix it? Um, so I actually worked when I was in the military for a while in a shop where we had people undercover. So we were trained on, and I think if I remember right, I think it was 30 days, but it might have been less. But if someone put in a freedom.
You cut out a little bit there, Josh. I'm not sure if you're still there. Okay. He was losing. It seemed like he was losing a little connections there. If Dave, if you can, oh, he's coming back.
Sorry, did I lose you?
Yep. Yeah, you're good there now. I'm getting you back.
So if we can
Go ahead.
have in the intelligence community where people are undercover doing operations, if we can be held to the standard that when Joe Smo calls in and says, "I want to know X, Y, and Z," that you have a deadline of a few weeks to get that information to them, or you have to have an explanation and it has to fit a very category. Why wouldn't that apply to every area of government? So if any citizen requests anything, it should be made public very shortly, unless there's an extremely good reason. So that'll be
Yeah,
something
it's funny.
we will.
I want to point this out to you just
Sorry,
because,
what's that?
like, you got the baby crying in the background. You got the mic. It comes off very,
Sorry.
no, it's great. I liked it. It's exactly what people should hear because it's the reality of the reality of the world. You're taking time out of your busy day to do this, so I greatly appreciate your time. It is kind of muffling, scuffling, and stuff, so I don't want to ruin. It's been a great time overall. So I want to give Dave because this mic's working good. Good, maybe 30 seconds or so, or he's already gone. It looks like. So if you can speak for maybe about 30 seconds, and then we'll just close it out. I just want to make sure your mic's coming through clearly.
Sure.
Just say,
Can
just kind of give us an overview of why you think everyone should vote for you on Tuesday.
can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
So I'm sorry about that,
No,
but
you're good.
bottom line is, I as you can hear, I've got kids in the background and stuff. I don't need this job, but the state needs change. We need transparency. We need to get in there and do a review. And if in 30 days at the end of the review there isn't a clear reason why, then we need to make some changes. We need to go back to hand counts if the technology is not working. Technology is supposed to make things faster, cheaper, and more secure. If it's not doing that, then we'll just go back to what works. We go back to hand count. The same thing is true of staff. If we do a review after 30 days, it's one of the things Dave asked me. He said, if you find it, they're not doing their job, do you have the courage? Are you willing to fire people? And yes, that's absolutely true. It was one of the first things he asked me. So we're going to go in there and we're going to do a review, and then we're going to be transparent, and we're going to make the changes necessary. And if I find out I'm wrong on some of this, that we don't need to make these changes, then we're going to come and we'll do a X space and we'll be public and transparent as to why. We're not going to hide behind the position or the title. We work for the people.
Well, appreciate your time again, and thanks. And like I said, it's not an issue. Don't sweat on the bait. It's awesome, actually. You're not going to find too many candidates that are willing to even take this time to do what you're doing. So greatly appreciate that. And like I said, I'm going to take the recording, put it in a video format, and share it across platforms. Put it on the website. So if you need to send it to anybody, just send them there. But again, it really should highlight your military history. You and Dave, the whole reason we did this call is because I really wanted to highlight both your guys' military history. It wasn't meant to attack other candidates or anything like that. It's just that I didn't know either one of you guys were really military. So I think it's a very good point to really put that into perspective.
Thank you for the opportunity to connect with the citizens and voters.
Yeah, and I hit up Alaska Rants. He's a way bigger audience. He does spaces a lot more often than I am. I'm getting kind of back into spaces. I did them in the previous campaign a lot more. I had we got up to 400 people at a time when we were doing national calls on ranked choice. And you were actually in a call with Hawaii yesterday. I don't know how many people,
Yeah.
like 20 something people we had on that Zoom yesterday. So sometimes we get lots of audience, sometimes we don't. The big deal is that it's recorded and we take it and we share it across platforms, and you can reshare it and make sure everyone hears it. But overall, very good call. And I really enjoyed hearing some really cool stuff and I really wanted to dive in a little more deeper into your military history. So maybe we'll do a one-on-one, like lieutenant governor call, maybe with you and, after the primary is over.
Sounds good.
All right, sir. Well, thank you again.
All right. You too. Have a great day.
You too.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.